The best thing, right, is to be happy day by day. That is to say, learn to chill out. For those of you that like that idea that you need to just be a little bit less intense, here comes your favorite lines of the play, baby. Happy he on the weary sea, who hath fled the tempests and won the haven. Happy whosoever hath risen free above his striving. For strangely graven is the orb of life, that one and another in gold and power may outpass his brother. It's silly to try and look to gain gold, money, and fame, power. It's dumb. And try to somehow outpass your brothers. Try to be better than all others. And men in their millions float and flow and seethe with a million hopes as leaven. And they win their will, or they miss their will, and the hopes are dead or are pined for still. But whoever can know, as the long days go, that to live is happy, hath found his heaven. The idea here, the best thing you can do in your life is to try and live your life in a simple way and to be happy. Of course, Greeks will hear lines like this and they'll recognize that Dionysius is suggesting you can do that a whole lot better if you reverence the gods and of course you enjoy your wine every once in a while, right? And then Pentheus comes on stage dressed as a woman. We've got our costume. We're ready to go. Deck me as thou wilt. Dress me up as you need to. Pentheus then will turn and see Dionysius for the first time. And he says, hey, you're wearing horns. In other words, Pentheus will now see the god in his actual appearance. Notice the transformation, right? That is to say, when Dionysius changes to his real form, Pentheus changes to the form that Dionysius once looked like. The hair, the garland, the robe, the wand, the whole gig, right? Dionysius says, I'm going to take you to the pines to watch. Your mother will bring you back. Now the ironies here are deep. Dionysius says, all right, let's go. This is what you go to see. And to trap them so they trap not thee. In other words, I hope that you're aware that you're going to trap them, but this may not turn out the way that you think it should. In other words, notice, like in many other Greek dramas, you're going to have Dionysius actually telling Pentheus what's about to happen, and Pentheus cannot understand it, but the audience does. That's what we call that dramatic or on-stage irony. Watch. Fourth, he says, through the Thebans' town, Pentheus says, let's go. I'm their king. They're one man. Seeing I dare this thing, I'm willing to do it. Dionysius says, yeah, you're going to bear their burden. You, all alone. Therefore, thy trial awaiteth thee. The fact that Dionysius calls what Pentheus is about to go through a trial is very true. But on, with me into thine ambush shalt thou come unscathed, and let another bear thee home. In other words, I will take you to the mountain. I will not be bringing you back. Pentheus will say, I know, the queen, my mother. Let her bring me back. Dionysius says, marked of every eye, you're going to be watched. You're going to be seen by everyone when you come back with your mommy. For that I go. In other words, he says, no. That's why I'm going. I am going to get Agave and the rest of those women and bring them back. Dionysius says, thou shalt be born on high. The ironies are dark here. Pentheus thinks that he's saying you're going to come back as a regal king. Of course, the only thing that's going to come back to Thebes with Mama will be his head, right? Pentheus says, that were like pride. I got to be careful. Dionysius says, thy mother's hands shall share thy carrying. Pentheus says, nay, I need not such soft care. In other words, I don't need my mommy to look after me. Dionysius says, oh really, so soft? Pentheus says, where it be, whatever happens, I've earned it well. And he walks off stage towards the mountain. Whatever happens, I've earned this. Now, this is again back to that debate about fate versus determinism and free will and all of that. Here it is. Pentheus himself will say it. He doesn't realize what he's saying, but he's saying, whatever happens to me, I've earned it. Dionysius will say, fell fell art thou. You're done. And to a doom so fell thou walkest, that thy name from south to north shall shine, a sign forever. In other words, Dionysius, the god, says, Pentheus will be the sign of all signs to all skeptics to come throughout the ages. Reach thou forth thine arms, Agave, now, and ye dark-browed Cadman sisters, the Maenads, greet this prince so proud to the high ordeal, where, save God and me, none walks unscathed. The rest this day shall see. The fact that this little passage ends with the word see, well, think of it. That's exactly what theater is, isn't it? It's the challenge of seeing something. And of course, it's always the question of, well, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? The fourth choral lyric will come on, the Bacchae again, a song of vengeance. The hounds of hell, they're predicting, will whip the Maenads into a frenzy. And the word justice will in fact get used. That is to say, the sacrilegious person, the skeptic, the non-believer, should be punished. And again, here we ask, before this pivotal final scene, right, of the messenger who will tell us what happens to poor Pentheus, the question is Euripides for real? Or is he making fun of anyone who, for example, believes in these kinds of stories, these myths? How you answer this question, think about this, will determine the meaning of this very play. If you think Euripides, for example, is kind of making fun of this whole project, that's one thing. If you think he's dead on serious, well, that's another thing. Of course, audiences from 405 on were sometimes not so clear about what Euripides was doing here, right? Well, in our final real episode, we've got a messenger. Now again, in Greek theater, you cannot show serious acts of violence. So you'll remember, for example, in Oedipus Rex, or you'll remember in Antigone, for example, in the Sophocles plays, you had a messenger that came onto the stage that kind of told you what happened. Well, a messenger comes on stage to tell the chorus exactly what's happened. He says it. The most brutal, imaginable thing has happened, and without question, this is the most brutal, and it really is controversial in many ways of any of the Greek dramas. I said earlier when I began my comments that there is no way that Aeschylus or Sophocles could have written this play, and as we get into these lines, you'll see what I mean by that. It took the younger Euripides, it took the crazy Euripides, it took the hellion Euripides to write a play like this. Well, the messenger comes on and he says it simply, Prometheus is dead. And immediately the choral leader says, praise Bacchus, all right? Praise Dionysius. And the messenger will say, yeah, no, you should hear what happened. Well, what did happen? Well, we're told that Pentheus, the messenger, and Dionysius went to the mountains. And sure enough, the women were there. They hid among the trees. And they looked and watched. But Pentheus told Dionysius, the messenger says, I can't see it as well as I want to see. I want to get a better view. So Dionysius said, what about up in one of those trees? So he bends the tree down, he lets Pentheus get into the tree, and he gets to rise up above the women so that he has the ability to see down. It's at this point that then all of a sudden Dionysius is gone. And the only thing remaining is a voice. And the voice will call to the Maenads and say, hey, women, he's here for you. It's now time for you to exact your vengeance. And in lines that every time I read these lines out loud, they always shock my students. I referenced, I think, early on in that moment in Browning's Porphyria's Lover when the line is, I strangled her. I'm quite sure she felt no pain. And you go, whoa, 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 what did I just read? These are as well lines. Now I'm gonna leave the Harvard Classics translator. I'm gonna go to the Henry Hart Millman translation, just simply because it's one of the most compelling, I think, translations. The women realize that Pentheus is up in the tree. Led by Agave, Pentheus' mother, they circle the tree, they uproot the tree. The power that they have is immense. And there, all of a sudden we're told, 1,000 hands were on the ash, and tore it from the earth. And he that sat aloft, down, headlong, down, fell to the ground with 1,000 piteous shrieks. Pentheus, for well he knew his end was near. His mother first began the sacrifice, and fell on him. His bonnet, to make him look like a woman, from his hair he threw, that she might know, and so not slay him. The sad Agave. And he said, her cheek fondling, he reaches up, and he touches his mother's cheek. I am thy child, thine own, my mother. Pentheus, whom in Eschion's house you bear, have mercy on me, mother, for his sins, whate'er be his sins, kill not thy son. She, foaming at the mouth, her rolling eyeballs whirling around in her unreasoning reason, by Bacchus all possessed, knew he did not. She caught him in her arms, seized his right hand, and with her feet set on his shrinking side, tore out the shoulder. Not with her own strength. The god made easy that too cruel deed. And Ino, her sister, his aunt, labored on the other side, rending the flesh. Atono, the other sister, the other aunt, all the rest pressed fiercely on. And there was one wild den, he groaning deep, while he had breath to groan, they shouting triumph, and one bore an arm, one a still sandaled foot, and both his sides lay open, rent, each in her bloody hand, tossed wildly to and fro, lost Pentheus's limbs. The trunk lay far aloft neath the rough rocks, part amid the forest's thick strewn leaves, not easy to be found. The wretched head, which the mad mother, seizing in her hands, held on a spear fixed, she bore aloft all over the mountain, as a mountain lion's, leading her sisters in their Maenad dance. In other words, she tears off, the mother tears off her own son's head and puts it on a stick, and they dance around in the strange dance of the Maenads. And she comes vaunting an ill-fated chase unto these walls, invoking Bacchus still, her fellow hunter, partner in her prey, her triumph soon to end in tears. In other words, she's come to Thebes, and all the women with them. I fled the sight of that dark tragedy, no question, hastening ere yet Agave reached the palace. Oh, to be reverent, to adore the gods. This is the noblest, wisest course of man, taking dread warning from this dire event. Well, this is disturbing, to say the least. I mean, I've had students that say, whoa, that's some of the most... This was written when? 400 years before Christ was born. Very disturbing. Again, this whole thing of sparagmos, this tearing apart of the live animal. Of course, to be fair, Agave does not know that she's doing this to her own son. Pentheus, in his final moments, only too late realizes. He gets to see, he gets to experience, too late though realizes. And at the very end of this speech, notice one more time, it is this idea of you better respect the gods or something terrible might happen to you. The chorus is actually pleased. Now to finish the play quickly. They call it payback. Agave will arrive. And of course, this is the most pathetic of scenes. She comes on stage with the severed head of her son. She thinks it's a mountain lion. She says, he was young in the wild wood without nets. I caught him. Nay, look without fear on the lion. I've taken him. Right? I caught the lion. Agave says later, of Cadmus laid hand on him, but the swift hand that slaughters is mine. Mine is the praise. Bless ye this day of days. She is, of course, still in her crazy frenzy stupor. She does not realize what's going on. Then she says it, the irony of all ironies. And Pentheus, where is Pentheus, my son? He shall set up a ladder stair against this house, And in the rafters here, nail up this lion's head, that glorious I bring him, having slain the lion. I, even I. The where is my son? Of course, this is the darkest of irony. I mean, if you ever needed a definition of irony, this is it. Taking us, of course, back to Sophocles' Oedipus Rex as well. Probably the classic example. She's literally holding the head of her son, the severed, decapitated head of her son, and she's asking, where is my son? He's a great hunter. He's going to appreciate this trophy that I bring back. He's going to want to hang it up in the rafters the way, for example, in the Beowulf epic, the arm of Grendel gets hung up in Hrothgar's Heorot Hall. Same notion. I've got a trophy. This is awesome, right? And then Cadmus comes on stage. Of course, Cadmus realizes all too late. Oh, with your awful burden. On, he says, with your awful burden. Follow me, he says. Thralls to his house, whose bloody, grievously, and with many a weary search at last in dim Clayton's gleams I found, torn limb from limb. Cadmus's job was to pick up all the body parts of his grandson Pentheus and bring it back. And sure enough, there he is back, along with, returned with gray Tiresias. Agave, however, he says, when he got to the, where is Agave? And all of a sudden, Agave turns, and she says, my father, a great boast is thine this hour. Thou hast begotten daughters, high in rank and valiant above all mankind, yea, all valiant, though none like me. I have let fall the shuttle by the loom, and raised my hand for higher things, to slay from out thy land wild beasts. See, in mine arms I bear the prize, that nailed upon these portals it may rise, to show what things thy daughters did. Do thou take it, and call a feast. Proud art thou now, and highly favored in our valiancy. Of course, as she's saying this, Cadmus is just beside himself with grief. Cadmus will say, a fair sacrifice to stand before God's altar, right? All of us are lost. That is to say, for Cadmus, it's over. It's an awful burden, he says, and it's over. All of us are lost. He helps Agave to see. This takes a few minutes for him to do this, what she has done. And the myth of Actaeon and Artemis has been standing all the while right behind us on the same mountain out there. Of course, Actaeon was the one that made fun of the goddess Artemis, and his own dogs tore him up to pieces. Here we have the story playing the same game. That is to say, the payback. And we hear about it. The payback is simple. Agave and her sisters mocked Dionysius to mock the god, and thine own ecstasy. Cadmus says, 'tis Dionysius who has done this. And then he says it. Now I see. He made like, the question is, why was Pentheus on the mountain, Agave will ask. And again, Cadmus will say, he made like to you, adoring not the god, who therefore to one bane hath brought you and this body, wrecking all our line. In other words, the house of Cadmus is now ended. With the death of Pentheus, there is no one left, because Mama Agave has killed her own son. Cadmus will continue, and he says, and now I fare forth in dishonor, outcast, I, the great Cadmus, who sowed the seed rows of this state of Thebes. It's over. And this will not shock you, because it's a Greek play. The word woe, woe, woe to me, and the also, woe to thy mother and her sisters, woe alway. Oh, whoso walketh not in dread of gods, let him but look on this man dead. Now, these are of course compelling lines. Cadmus saying to Agave, we will forever be remembered for our disrespect, right? A destroyed man, he calls himself, right? The leader of the chorus will say, I weep with thee, but 'tis but due reward God sent on Pentheus. But for thee, Cadmus, it's hard, because Cadmus, of course, was worshiping the god at the beginning of the play, right? And then all of a sudden we've got out of our manuscript a page or more that has been lost, okay? And it apparently contained a speech of Agave, followed presumably by some words of the chorus, and an appearance by Dionysius upon a cloud. He must have pronounced judgment upon the Thebans in general, and especially upon the daughters of Cadmus, having justified his own action and declared his determination to establish his godhead. And then when the manuscript picks back up again, we find Dionysius, and he is addressing Cadmus. And these are the final words of the play. Several things happen. Both Cadmus and his wife are doomed to be snakes or dragons, depending on how you translate it. And it's ultimately, they're going to come back to attack Greek cities. Then we have the tragedy of Agave, the mother, right? Dionysius. Agave will say, Dionysius, we beseech thee, we have sinned, please forget. Dionysius says, it's too late. When there was time, you knew me not. We're thinking now, of course, of that Matthew 25:41 passage, right? When did we see you hungry, thirsty, or whatever? Agave says, we have confessed, yet is thy hand too hot. Dionysius says, you mocked me, being God. This is your wage. This is what you owe. Agave says, should God be like a proud man in his rage? Now, this is one of the most interesting lines of the play. Because along with the Hippolytus that we studied in our last text, to ask about Aphrodite in that play, I mean, she acts like a spoiled little girl. So Hippolytus is not giving her proper reverence, and so she kills him and destroys a family? Here, notice, Agave asks, is this any way for a god to behave? It's sometimes been translated, by the way, out of the Greek that way. Is this any way for a god to behave? Which again begins to lead a certain reader and viewer of this play to wonder, is Euripides having a bit of fun with this whole Dionysian myth and the whole notion that Zeus slept with Semele and produced this son of God and all of that? In other words, is Euripides kind of saying through the mouth now of Agave, this is no way for a god. Whatever you are, you ain't no god. Okay, this is insanity. There are others who will read this and say, maybe this is the attempt to speak about